Hey guys. Okay, so I'm not even editing this video. This is just on photo booth on my computer. And I wanted to give you guys a fun video this week. And I made one on Havdalah and like on Havdalah candles. And I was actually going to show you like a DIY sort of like Havdalah candle hack where I make my own Havdalah candles basically out of birthday candles. And they're really just kind of fun. But I did a whole video on that. And basically I spent hours shooting it and hours editing it this week, and then as I was rewatching it, because I just rewatched the videos like several times throughout the editing process, and I realized that I was wearing a dark shirt that was like, it's like a sweater, and it's very thin material, ever so slightly sheer, which I hadn't really noticed before that. And just the lights were like beaming in on me, and I could see it, but I don't know that like anyone else could tell, but I could just kind of see like the outline of my undergarments. So I like kept thinking like, is it just me? Like, maybe I'm like being too nitpicky, but ultimately I realized that if I could see it, probably somebody else might be able to notice it as well. So just in the name of Tzniut, I decided not to share that video after all, which was super frustrating, but I feel like I made the right decision for posterity's sake. So that's why I don't have like more, edited video this week. I'm trying to kind of stay on top of a little bit more, like sharing more videos with you guys. And so that's why I don't really have like an official video this week. And that's such a bummer, but at the same time, it was just kind of a nice little moment for me to recognize how far I've come in Tzniut and just kind of growing into the idea of modest dress. And, that it was a black sweater, long sleeve, kind of just like what I'm wearing now. Except it was, like I said, just a little bit too thin that it caught the outlines of like what I was wearing underneath. To say it modestly. So it's just funny because that's just such a great example of the type of sensitivities that we gain as we grow into different observances, and particularly Tzniut especially. It's something that you kind of grow into. So as much of a frustrating situation that was, it's nice to see that I'm sort of progressing in terms of, like I said, my sensitivity around my observances. So that was just a kind of an interesting, I guess, way to look at the silver lining, I suppose. But yeah, so I guess sort of in honor of that, I wanted to talk about the idea of Tzniut and where I'm at, because that was actually my Tzniut video was the first video I ever did on this channel. It's called Talk About Tzniut. And it's one of my more popular ones. I think it's maybe my second popular one after my conversion video. So in that video, I actually have an intro piece which I kind of stopped using in my videos. But there is an intro, and there's like different little clips of me in Israel. And at the time, I actually wasn't observant at all. It was my first trip to Israel. I was just starting to kind of get my head around the idea, like the idea of Shabbat. So like that's kind of where I was at. It was 2 summers ago now, like 1.5 years ago. And so yeah, in one of those little like vignettes, I guess, in one of the little scenes, I'm walking through a bus station. I think that was actually in Jerusalem, perhaps, either Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. And I'm actually wearing a tank top. And I've gotten several comments, even like recently, but I get several comments about that. And people saying, like, oh, you're not Tzniut, you're wearing a tank top, like, how you're a hypocrite, basically. And, some people say it in mean ways, some people say it, gently and nicely. But the point being, like, yeah, that's who I am, that's who I was at the time. And I'm not taking that down, and I definitely like don't feel any sort of shame over the fact that I've worn tank tops before. And I think that that's an important thing to like keep in mind as you grow into Tzniut, is not to become judgmental of those who aren't wearing more like modest dress like you are, and more importantly, not to judge your past self for the dress that you used to wear. And for me, when I look back at that, I just think like, wow, like, I've really, changed the way that I dress, and like I've adapted myself to this, totally different lifestyle. And for me, that's a great way to kind of look at the before and after. And I don't think there's anything to sort of be ashamed of just because I used to, wear tank tops or short skirts and things like that. But I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I feel like, I mean, Tzniut is such a touchy subject, and people get just so riled up when they talk about it, because I think there's unfortunately like a deep sense of shame that's tied to dressing modestly, and more of like when people don't dress modestly. And I think that's just not the healthiest way to go about it. I think for me, the idea of dressing modestly is really just having like bring a little more dignity, I guess, to your body and your garb, and being more protective over, you know, how you're representing yourself in this world, how you're sort of stepping out into this world and representing yourself as a Jew in this world specifically. And always remembering that we are Hashem's daughters and we should carry ourselves with that kind of dignity. And so for me, that's so much of what Tzniut is about. And that's kind of like, for me, I guess I would say that's almost like 50% of why I dress modestly now. And the other 50%, I would say, is just out of care for our Jewish brothers, out of, the sort of idea of like guarding your eyes and just kind of making it easier when we're, interacting or just, kind of near people of the opposite gender. So those are reasons I, really got into Tzniut and decided to take it on as part of my Jewish observance. And yeah, I don't know. So I don't know where I was going with that, but basically, it's something that I've really appreciated and grown into. And like I said, I'm just gradually becoming, more sensitive to sort of the bounds of Tzniut. And even now, people like I'm dressed like right now. I'm wearing long sleeves and all that. I'm wearing a long skirt, but I also do wear pants, and I do wear kind of heavy eye makeup. And people might point at me and say like, "Oh, you're not Tzniut. Like you're wearing like fake eyelashes. You're wearing too much makeup, or oh, you're wearing pants out, out in public." And so, actually, just a little side note for me on pants. Where I'm at is that as long as like my sort of midsection, if you will, is not like tight, I guess, like if the clothing is not tight around my mid lower section, I'm fine with pants. And so I take kind of more like a modern Orthodox approach, where a lot of modern Orthodox women will wear pants. So as long as they're kind of like loose around like the midsection, I'm totally comfortable with that. And so I'll wear things like sweatpants and things like that. In terms of like tights, like leggings, in other words, leggings and like tight jeans, personally, I would still wear them, but only if they were like with a long, kind of like baggy shirt, again, so that my mid lower section would be covered. So for me, like, just, that's just kind of my sensitivity at this moment when I look at people, honestly, of the opposite, like, or just of both genders, rather, I just think they're like not in a perverted way, but I think there's like a natural inclination to sort of look at the mid-genital, like sort of mid-section, I guess. And you're just, I don't know, you just kind of like scan people's bodies, and it's not a perverted thing to do. It just, I feel like it's just kind of like human nature. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I tend to do that. So for that, kind of on the flip side, I want that area covered on my body. So that's just kind of how I feel. I'm not like sensitive to seeing people's like necklines. Elbows certainly don't bother me, ankles don't bother me, and so I'll prefer to have like a neckline this high, but I have certain sweaters and stuff that'll go just a little bit lower, and I'm totally comfortable with that. So that's where I'm at right now. And where was I going with that? I guess just explaining that, I guess I'm just really trying to explain that it's a process and something that you grow into. And as you're growing into it, don't shame other people, and don't ever feel ashamed of where you're coming from. And just keep in mind like why you're actually observing the idea of modest dress to begin with. And another thing to mention is that when we talk about Tzniut, we put such an emphasis on the way that we dress, but it's so much about the way that we carry ourselves, and how we are speaking to other people, how we're drawing attention to ourselves or not, when it's appropriate. And it's just kind of the whole package. So for me, it's so much more than just how I'm wearing my clothes, like what I'm wearing, but it's really how I'm wearing it and how I'm carrying myself in the world in my clothes. So those are just kind of some things I wanted to share. And I feel like it's just such a I'm kind of, obviously I'm here on YouTube, like sharing my Jewish journey, sharing my experiences and my thoughts on Judaism. So I am, calling attention to myself, and I'm, opening myself up for comments and criticism, and lots of, positive support as well. But, I definitely get some comments that are a little bit nasty sometimes here and there, just judgy comments, people talking about how I'm not, modest enough, or I'm not observant enough, and this and that. So, when you guys get, I feel like it's definitely not just me. That just so happens all throughout the Jewish world. Like, I'm firmer than you, I'm more, this or that. Like, there's just such competition. It's really awful, but it's the reality. So, on that note, I just want to remind everyone to just, take heart, and just, don't give so much, don't feed into that energy. Basically, just know where you stand, where you came from, and where you're headed. And I think that's all that really matters, just making sure that you're well oriented on your journey, and just don't pay attention to, other people and their feedback, I guess, because what matters is that, you're aspiring to become observant, and that you're aspiring to grow into certain things, and you're never going to just be able to pick something up and just turn around and suddenly be perfectly observant. Even like frum folks are not perfectly observant, and I think that that's, it's sadly something that, like, I didn't know that. Like, it sounds ridiculous, but for me, like, before I got more active in the Jewish community, I just assumed that every Jew just had their stuff together, and especially if you're from, like, you really had your stuff together and you were never making a single mistake. And I just put Jewish observance, and like observant Jews rather, like on such a pedestal, thinking like, oh my gosh, they just, yeah, like they have everything together. And it is totally a process, especially if you're like a Baal Tshuva, or a convert like me. Like, don't worry about rushing so much into it. I know it's a tendency of like converts and BTs to kind of like throw down and like get really like hardcore into like observance because we're excited by it, which is great. But don't forget that it's a process, and you will get there. And kind of like what I went through this week, you'll have moments where you stop and realize like, wow, I really have grown a lot, and I've really changed how I observe, different, aspects of halacha. And I've learned about this, and I've really integrated into my life. And you can have those little steps where you realize like you've actually grown. So let yourself grow, let yourself get into it, in a gradual way. Like, don't sweat it if you're not like perfect immediately, because that's just not natural. And I guess I'm sort of saying this to my past self in a sense, because at the time, when I started getting into Tzniut, and I started getting some comments from people like saying like, you're wearing a tank top, or that's a lot of eyelash, like a lot of eyelashes you're wearing, and things like that. Like, I was super self-conscious, and I was like worried like, oh shoot, am I misrepresenting myself? And it is what it is. Like, you can't always try to like be the perfect type of Jew that you want to be. Like, the point is that you have an idea of what that ideal is at based on your learning, and based on your observances and your aspirations. And like, kind of, that's like the point. You want to make sure that you have a goal, you want to make sure that you have that type, the ideal that you want to grow into. And as long as you have that, you're good, and you don't have to worry about people criticizing you along the way, or people thinking that you're just not like enough. I guess that's kind of what I want to say. I'm sort of blabbering on at this point. But anywho, that is why I don't have a video for like another video for you guys that's a little more edited. I'm not even going to chop this one up, so I'm just going to toss this up. But that's it. I just wanted to share that. And thanks again, you guys, for listening. And I'll see you guys next week. Happy Tu B'Shvat. It's still Tu B'Shvat here. Oh no, it's after hours now. So it is now over. But so happy Shabbos. Have a great Shabbat this week, you guys. And I will see you guys next week, hopefully with an actual like proper video. And I'll see you around. Shalom Aleichem.